Okay, here we are, QRAC Radio. We have a guest tonight, Shelly Harrison, with she is the district captain volunteer for the Convention of States. And she was going to speak to us tonight about the United States Constitution. This is the beginning of a four-part series. This is part one. These are going to be pre-recorded and airing on February 2nd, part 2 on March 1st, part 3 will be March 8th, and then part 4, March 22nd. So mark your calendars, be ready. All right. Shelly, are you ready?
I am.
Okay. I'm going to start your slideshow, and then I'm going to shut up. So,
Right. That's just great. Okay. Well, Dale, if you'll go to the first slide, next slide. So I want to talk to our community about the United States Constitution. One of the reasons that I got interested in this in the first place is because I began volunteering last year with the Convention of States, which is a grassroots movement to help bring power back to the people and the states and reduce the federal government. I don't know about you, but I feel like the federal government has gotten too large and too powerful. It is bigger than the framers intended it to be, and it was never meant to be overpowering to the states. It was meant to serve the states. So, unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Seem to be allowed to make sweeping decisions that impact millions of Americans on a daily basis, and that was never an intention. The framers of the Constitution gave us Article 5, and I'm going to go completely through the Constitution. That's why this is a four-part series. And with Article 5, it allows the states to call a convention. This is not a constitutional convention. It is an Article 5 convention. And the purpose of that would be to propose amendments to the Constitution that could do things such as limit terms for elected and unelected bureaucrats, bring fiscal responsibility back to the federal government, and reestablish the state sovereignty. If you want to learn more about Article 5 and the mission of Convention of States, you can go to that website that's on the screen right there, conventionofstates.com. And there's a petition for you to sign. I would love it if you would sign the petition, and that would be seen by our legislators, and they hear our collective voice when we do that. I personally believe that as citizens, regardless of our party affiliation, we are all stewards of the Constitution. We the people, it was meant to really mean we the people. And truly, it's up to each and every one of us to protect and defend the liberty and freedom that we hold dear, and to pass that along to the next generation to do the same. And one other thing, we need you. I am one person. I'm serving 5 districts in the western part of the state of Missouri. And I would just love if some folks would like to volunteer and spend an hour a month, helping me with different things and events. So appreciate it, Dale. Thank you. So I personally believe that America was founded by the hand of God, and his hand of blessing has carried us this far. However, have we strayed from our first love? I hold this particular verse dear. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Each of these 4 sessions, I'm going to bring you a different scripture that I think really speaks to America and the founding of America and our path forward. So today's agenda is I'm going to, over the next 4 sessions, I'm going to go through very methodically the history of our Constitution, what our country is. I know we hear that word democracy every day. We're not a democracy. We are not a true democracy. We are a constitutional republic. I'm going to explain that. I'm going to, in this session, go through who were the framers and our founding fathers and who they were and what kind of people they were and what ultimately happened to them. And then the birth of the United States Constitution. I want to also talk a little bit. This was a question that's been posed to me a few times, and it was actually my sister that said, please talk about why this document, even though it's 250 years old, is still relevant to us today, because there's questions. A lot of our younger generation don't really understand the document and don't really know its relevance for today. And so I think that's very important. So next slide. All right. So here's just a brief overview of the timeline of our constitutional history. You'll see that in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. That was no small feat, and it was a dangerous thing for the men that signed that document. And then they created the Articles of Confederation that was passed and adopted by the Continental Congress in 1777, and it served as our first Constitution of the United States in the first 13 states. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. The United States Constitution was signed on September 17, 1787, and it was ratified by 9 of the original 13 states by June 21st of 1788. Our Bill of Rights, which is the first, actually 10 amendments, were passed in 1789 and ratified in 1791. Congress has since passed 23 amendments, and the states have ratified 17 of those additional amendments. Beyond this, many changes to the interpretation of the Constitution has been done through the Supreme Court, through various rulings. Our original Constitution with the Bill of Rights was a bit over 7,000 words and has now expanded to over 3,000 pages because of judicial rulings. So let's talk first about a constitutional republic. What is it? How's it different? A constitutional republic is not a pure democracy, and asserting all the power that comes from the people and the founders of the republic, they had no intention of creating a direct or pure democracy. Early American statesmen, and most of their successors actually, distrusted popular passions and appetites quite as much as they distrusted the ambitions of strong men. They were not under the illusion that most men and women are naturally good or wise. They knew that neither popular majority nor a clever and able minority is fit to be trusted with absolute power. Therefore, the United States is not a centralized democracy. It is empowered by the people and measures all things against their document, which is the Constitution. The majority opinion or any political leader cannot be the final court of review for government action. The actions of the governing bodies must be in agreement with and not contrary to the people's Constitution. This is one of the reasons why the Constitution is so valuable to us today as a people. So, a republic, what is a republic? A republic is a system in which the common people are involved in governmental affairs. I would dare say that most of us are not involved in governmental affairs today. I wasn't until the last year. Um, the word republic actually comes from the Latin phrase res publica, which literally means the public thing. A republic is where the people elect and delegate responsibility to their elected representatives in government to make decisions within the confines of the Constitution and that which protects the people's right. So a democracy is a form of government where every person has a voice because humanity is flawed by greed, selfishness, self-serving power. This becomes mob rule at times, and it must be in order for the republic to be in a force. It must be in agreement and not contrary to the Constitution. So, last thing, our Constitution does not grant rights. That's very important to understand. In all pure democracies, their constitutions or their documents grant rights and liberties and freedoms to the people. When a government grants rights, they can take those rights away at any time. Our forefathers believed that our rights were God-given, inalienable rights and freedoms, and our Constitution protects the people from the power and overreach of the government. So who were the framers? Nearly 250 years ago, a brave group of patriots signed their names to a document that would change the course of human history and each of their lives. Standing tall, straight, and unwavering, they pledged not to their country, not to the people, but to each other. They made this pledge for the support of this declaration with firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, that's God. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. It's been said, this is in quotes, they were not wild-eyed, rabble-rousing ruffians. These were soft-spoken men of means and education. They had every comfort and security afforded them of the day, and yet they valued liberty more. So, who were the 56 men that signed the Declaration of Independence? 23 of them were lawyers, 12 were merchants, 12 were farmers, 4 were physicians, medical physicians, 2 were manufacturers, 1 was a politician, 1 was a printer, publisher, and scientist, that would be Benjamin Franklin, and 1 was a minister. They were all religious men, all Protestant except for 1, Charles Carroll, who was Roman Catholic. All of the signers put their lives and fortunes on the line in order to preserve and protect the freedoms and the God-given unalienable rights of all people. So what happened to them? You can see here this list. 5 of them were captured by the British as traitors and put to death. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost sons in the Revolutionary Army. 2 had sons captured by the British. 9 fought and died from wounds or hardships of the war. 2 became bankrupt, losing everything and literally living in rags for the rest of their lives. And 1 lost his wife, who died after the British jailed her. Others lost friends and families. And still others lived the remainder of their lives on the run, moving constantly to avoid capture by the British. So let's talk about the Constitutional Convention. As a volunteer of the Convention of States, I like to make sure that people understand the Constitutional Convention is different than an Article 5 convention. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the articles. But the big difference is the Constitutional Convention was convened in order to have a constitutional document. An Article 5 constitution, an Article 5 convention can only be called for the purposes of making an amendment It cannot scrap or rewrite the Constitution in its entirety. So the Constitutional Convention was convened in the State House in Independence Hall in Philadelphia on May 14th in 1787. The delegates ranged in age from 26, who was Jonathan Dayton, to 81, Benjamin Franklin. And in fact, Benjamin Franklin was so infirm by that time that he often had to be carried into the State House. It was a long, very hot summer full of discussion and debate and in closed sessions. So one of the things that people don't think is back in that day, there wasn't air conditioning. They had to close the windows to hold closed sessions so that there weren't eavesdroppers outside of the room. So they met in closed sessions, and they drafted the document that eventually became our Constitution. Our Constitution was well debated, well argued. Not everyone agreed. There was lots of debate. There was careful thought and debate proffered on how much power to allow the central federal government. Keep in mind that this group of men understood a monarchy and the tyranny that comes with having a centralized, powerful government, and they wanted to avoid that at all costs. And so many of the representatives in Congress were allowed by each state, and they discussed how representatives should be elected. The United States Constitution was signed on September 17, 1787, and ratified in June of 1788, when New Hampshire became the 9th necessary vote to ratify the Constitution. So after months of work and many minds, the United States Constitution stands still today as a model of cooperative statesmanship and a beacon of hope and freedom around the world. Nothing else has ever existed like it. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, I have put references of what where I get this information from. Where I've gotten this is from the National Archives, then the United States Constitution.gov. Next slide. So why is the document nearly 250 years old still relevant today? Well, the Constitution established the governance order of the people, by the people, and for the people. Remember, going back to that republic, constitutional republic rather than a pure democracy. The federal government was established by the states, not to be more powerful than the states, but to serve the states. And we'll see in the next session, as we get into the articles, what some of the federal government enumerated powers were and still are, and all else was to be granted power to the states. The framers established 3 branches of government, and they did that to divide and balance the power so that none of the 3 branches of government should ever become overpowerful. So today, the Constitution still protects the individual's rights and freedoms. And as I mentioned before, we have over 3,000 pages of judicial review and opinion and rulings where people have challenged their infringements upon their constitutional rights. And as long as the people, we the people, that's you, that's me, that's you, Dale, that's each and every one of us, as long as the people are willing to continue to require it, the Constitution will continue to protect our rights. Without the purity of the Constitution, our government can and will become a tyranny, just as every other has within human history. And then lastly, this is me speaking, I am of the humble opinion that our Constitution is still relevant today because God ordained it, this great country, to serve as a beacon of light and his will. And if we continue to turn our backs on God, as our country has over the past 100 years, our country cannot continue to flourish. So next slide, please. So, with that, couple of things that I want to close with, and that is I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide as to, or the next session rather, as to the um, Articles of Confederation and the various documents. I do want to show, and I don't know if I can do this on the screen, I do want to show some books that I have used in preparation for these sessions. Oh, can you show that? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this first book is a collection of it is the Constitution, but it's a collection of writings, and in particular, one of the things that I really gained from this book is the Articles of Confederation and the Federalist. Oh, can I see it? Oh, you're gonna have okay. That particular book. Oh, great, thank you. That particular book. I'm. It also includes the Federalist Papers. I don't think most Americans do not realize the documentation that is available to us as in the public as to what our framers intended. And there's many writings from the framers, especially the Jefferson writings and, things like that. But in particular, the Federalist Papers are a terrific source of what the framers were trying to do. Another book that I have, I'll let you show that. Another book that I have is, I picked this up actually at Mount Vernon. It is a signed copy of a book called Plain Honest Men, The Making of the American Constitution. The author is Beeman. I forget his first name. Here, let me have that. Just a quick second. Richard Beeman is the name of the. This is a really terrific book for you to consider. Another book that I have this is a homeschooling curriculum. It's called Constitutional Literacy. This book is paired with a series of DVDs. And if you have children that you'd like to teach the Constitution to, this is terrific. It has 26 sections, and you can go through it methodically in one every couple of weeks. This book is actually written by someone I know. He is, the name of the author is Michael Ferris. Michael Ferris is a constitutional attorney, one of the very few attorneys that has litigated on Article 5, actually. So he is one of the co-founders of the Convention of States. This is a terrific book as well. Michael Ferris also wrote another book putting the constitutional law together. I purchased this book, Constitutional Law. It lists every single challenge to the United States Constitution in this book, and so it's got all the case law. It's kind of dry reading, I'll tell you that. But if somebody has a question about a particular case law, then it'll give you the synopsis of that and that. So I just wanted everybody to understand the resources that I used and what my intent was for these sessions. So Dale, any questions from you?
I had my mic turned off, so you didn't have to listen to me
Okay.
cough or sputter or anything. You did good. I don't know how we got to the point where we can't fire a bureaucrat.
That is That's a great comment. Let me just address that. The Convention of States, and you can go to conventionofstates.com to learn more about this. One of the goals of Convention of States is to put on the agenda for a convention of states to be called an Article 5 convention to have term limits on elected and unelected bureaucrats. So, for example, we have seen over the last few decades that career politicians continue to stay in office, continue to get very wealthy, and continue to garner more and more power.
That
more
incumbent thing is
exactly, and
just,
even more than that, those unelected bureaucrats that are appointed within the United States government stay in power for decades and decades as well. You wouldn't think that an unelected bureaucrat would have as much power, but we've seen over the last 3 years that they do.
And
Dr. Fauci is one of those bureaucrats that has spent, 45 years in his position, and he has garnered global power.
And apparently, unless you're caught stealing a lady's underwear, you can't get fired.
Touche.
Yeah, we've seen that.
We have seen that. Yes, we have.
They couldn't fire Fauci. The ATF, director of ATF, can't be fired.
But by constitutional amendment, we can.
Can
By constitutional amendment, we can say that unelected bureaucrats can serve for X period of time.
And I can understand why that might be a longer period.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of 4 years, it might be 10.
Yep.
But I think after 10 years, it's time for them to go.
Exactly.
They built up too much power.
Now, I'll talk a little bit, since we've got some time, I'll talk a little bit about what an Article 5 convention would look like. A little bit about that. We have 19 states currently that have passed resolutions to call a convention. We're poised at the moment to have 4 more states coming on. We've got legislation that close in 4 states. We have about 14 states altogether that have legislation moving and in committee and hearings being considered. But 4 states that we're very hopeful are pretty close to passing. Missouri
is one of the ones that has passed it.
Missouri is one of the ones that has passed, yes. So Missouri has passed, and right now we are working on a bill in the Missouri House. It's House Bill 823 currently, and you can look that up on the Missouri House of Representatives website. Just Google it. House Bill 823 is to call a resolution to call commissioners. And those commissioners would be what delegates are sent to the convention when a convention is called. And the reason we're working on that now is because Missouri has passed, but our work isn't done. We want to be ready to go when it happens that a convention is called. But what some people have asked me about the resolutions that the states passed to call a convention. I've had a lot of questions about, well, they could ask anything. We could lose our Second Amendment. No, that is absolutely not true. We could not lose our Second Amendment by a convention. Every resolution that has been passed in the 19 states have the exact same agenda items, and the rules of the convention are to follow those agenda items. Nothing new can be proposed. Nothing, no suggestions to scrap the entire Constitution. It would only be to make amendments. Now, you heard me earlier say that the original Congress passed 10 amendments, which began our Bill of Rights. There was lots of hot debate on what those amendments were. But ultimately, they hammered out the first 10 amendments. Since then, and we're going to go through this very methodically over the next few sessions, since then, Congress has proposed an additional 23 amendments. So Congress can propose amendments and the states can propose amendments. So it's always happened that Congress proposed amendments and the states in both scenarios ratified the amendments. So Congress has proposed an additional 23 amendments, but the states only agreed with and ratified 17 of those amendments. So the states do have the final say, whether it's Congress proposing it or whether the states call a convention and make their own proposals. So great discussion there, Dale. Thank you very much for that question.
Okay. Are you? Yeah. How about we're at 30 minutes with this short attention span.
All right.
We'll cut this one off, and you and I will record another one.
Great.
Now,
Sounds
what
great.
I should say is this will be on QRAZ Radio's Facebook page, QRAZ's YouTube page, and the plan, unless something goes wrong, which has happened, put it on 102.7 FM here in Adrian. Okay, Shelly, thank you.
You're very welcome. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to jump into the chat and answer those as I see them.
Okay, and we'll see you next time.